Gave a quick explanation, and that was that the land belongs to God. And Jesus is coming back in the second coming to Israel, and he's coming to wipe the land free of his enemies, and he's going to rule and reign as king of the entire earth from Jerusalem, which interesting is that it's the geographical center of the entire earth. I just love that. I'm just amazed by that. You know, I mean, I shouldn't be, but I am. It's just so awesome. But anyway, the Jews are God's people, and Jesus was a Jew. You know, we kind of lose track of that. And we don't support terrorism. And a lot of the news, you know, is in support of these terrorists. And of course, a lot of the world is for them. And notice how Israel has done this in such a way that's just amazing. I mean, it's never been done in war before where civilians aren't hurt. And where
there's some, but it's out of the way not to kill.
Exactly. And so they're not out to kill civilians. They're warning them before they're coming in. I mean, and to me that doesn't make any sense, because the terrorists are getting those same warnings. They know they're coming. You know, so, and yet God has given them these terrorists into their hands. But Israel is not trying to brutally murder anybody or be inhumane to anybody. They're really doing their best to just get the terrorists and not get everybody else. But and when I was thinking that last week on the fly, when he asked me that about why should we support Israel, you know, my brain thinks, I know this is terrible, my brain thinks in Old Testament, because it's just, God just kept me there for so long and I've learned so much. So I tend to kind of think Old Testament, and I hope y'all understand what I mean by that. But anyway, so when I was thinking that, I was thinking how the Israelites are judiciously blinded. And so I was immediately trying to think of what Old Testament, and I was thinking they were blinded in the wilderness, but that wasn't true. And so when I got home, I was really thinking about that, because I knew I was off there. And so I want to just divert a few minutes to make sure that I give you the correct information and that we really understand why we need to support Israel. So I want to look at Matthew 27, starting with verse 24. Matthew 27, starting with verse 24. And it says, when Pilate saw that he could prevail nothing, but that rather a tumult was made, he took water and washed his hands before the multitude, saying, I am innocent of the blood of this person, see ye to it. Then answered all the people and said, his blood be upon us and on our children.
Matthew what?
I hope it's 27:24. Then released he Barabbas unto them, and when he had scourged Jesus, he delivered him to be crucified. All right, now let's look at Romans 11:7. Romans 11:7. And I might have written it in Amplified, I'm not sure. All right, it says, what then? Israel hath not obtained that which he seeketh for, but the election hath obtained it, and the rest were blinded. According as it is written, God hath given them the spirit of slumber eyes that they should not see, and hear in ears that they should not hear. So here we go. Here's this judicial blindness. But God judiciously blind them, not because he's being ugly, not because he gave them what they wanted. And he said, let this be upon us and our children. And so I want to read it in the Amplified. I know that was King James. So Romans 11:7, I want to read it in the Amplified just to make sure we get it. He says, what then? Shall we conclude? Israel failed to obtain what it sought, God's favor by obedience to the law. Only elect, those chosen few, obtained it, while the rest of them became callously indifferent, blinded, hardened, and made insensible to it. As it is written, God gave them a spirit, an attitude of stupor, eyes that should not see, and ears that should not hear. That has continued down to this very day. So I want us to make sure we understand it's not that God is being mean to them. It's not that he just, you people that are Christians. Okay, so he never took away anybody's individual choice. But one lady I read, this is the second time I've read this book. And I don't know why it's impacting me so much different this second time than it did the first time. But it's called Imagine Heaven by John Burke. And this time, man, it's really impacting me. But anyway, maybe it's because I know how close we are. And I really strongly suggest all y'all read it. It's really phenomenal. But anyway, in the book, it's all about near-death experience. And this one lady he writes about was Jewish. And she went to, I'll say, the afterlife. And Jesus, immediately came to her. He showed her heaven and he showed her hell. And she said, in her own words, that I knew if I stayed, I would be in hell. And she said, and then she talked about how awesome Jesus was, how she wanted to stay with him, how she, the love, and everybody talks about, how they felt loved and accepted and all this stuff, but she knew she wouldn't stay there with him. Well, she came back to life. And she said, after she came back to life, well, obviously, she said that she couldn't believe in Jesus because she was a Jew. It really floored me. It really floored me. So she literally believed in every way, shape, and form this experience that she had. She knows she went to heaven. She knows that was Jesus. But when she came back, she refused to believe in Jesus because she was a Jew. That's what he's talking about. Now, she had every opportunity. And what did God say? What did Jesus say, to Thomas? Blessed are those who have not seen and believed. She saw and didn't believe.
Yeah.
She made a choice. And so that's what he's saying here, that these people made a choice. And he's just giving them what they chose. So if we read on in the Amplified, it says, what then shall we conclude? Israel failed to attain what it sought. God's favor by obedience to the law on the elect, those chosen few, obtained it, while the rest of them became callously indifferent, blinded, hardened, and made insensible to it. Listen, this is a warning to all of us. We believe with all our hearts, and we'll know very soon if this is Psalms 83 taking place before our eyes. Jesus is coming, because Ezekiel 38 is going to follow that. And Iran, Russia, and Turkey just met in New York, just like 3 days ago.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
That's Ezekiel 38. So listen, now is not the time to become callously indifferent, blinded, hardened, and made insensible.
And wasn't it not too many years ago, Turkey, we couldn't have imagined Turkey.
Oh no!
being a
Well,
part.
Lebanon too. Lebanon was Christian,
Right.
and then these terrorists came in.
And Turkey was an ally.
Yes,
Right.
Turkey was. They were an ally. They were good. They were for it.
They're still officially an ally.
That's what I
Right.
wondered.
Part of
So-
NATO, I think it is.
So that's why people think about reading the Bible years ago. Especially before 1948. I mean, you couldn't even imagine this stuff.
No.
No.
I mean, you could not even, nobody could, you literally had to take it by faith because there was absolutely no sign. Think about World War II and all these Jews, millions of Jews are killed. And then you read that in Ezekiel where the dry bones are going to stand up and come back. Who could imagine that?
I remember my dad sent me something on these prophecy guys, and one was Perry Stone, but I can't remember the main guy's name, Joe something. Anyway, his dad was really big into the prophecy. And he said what his dad couldn't wrap his mind around is where they came through Turkey, because Turkey was for peace and our allies.
Yes.
And he said, so my dad could never, he just took it by faith, but he couldn't wrap his mind
That's
around
right.
how that could happen without
That's
right.
Turkey resisting them.
That's right.
Anyway.
And it's the same with Lebanon. And so interestingly, if we read on the next verse in verse 9, we find Paul speaking of David. And so I want to read from 9 down to 12.
Where's that?
Are you back in? Yeah, I'm in Romans
Rome.
11, and we're going to start at verse 9. And David says, now this probably is in the Amplified. And David says, let their table, their feasting banquet, become a snare and a trap, a pitfall, and a just retribution, rebounding like a boomerang upon them. Let their eyes be darkened, dim, so that they cannot see, and make them bend their backs, stooping beneath their burden forever. So I ask, have they stumbled so as to fall to their utter spiritual ruin irretrievably? By no means, but through their false step and transgression, salvation has come to the Gentiles, so as to arouse Israel to see and feel what they forfeited, and so to make them jealous. So God reached out to the Gentiles. Do you know Iran is going to be restored? Iran is going to, it actually says that there's going to be a throne. Jesus is going to have some kind of throne in Iran. And so it clearly says Iran is going to be, it's not that God is not for the Gentiles. He is. We're a Gentile. He loves us. He loves Gentiles. But, and we are to provoke the Israelites to jealousy, not kill them. So verse 12, now if their stumbling, their lapse, their transgression has so enriched the world at large, and if Israel's failure means such riches for the Gentiles, think what an enrichment and greater advantage will follow their full reinstatement. Now, that's in the Amplified. They have more Nobel Prize winning people in Israel that are Jews than the world combined.
Yeah.
They are so intelligent. They are so smart. They are so talented. They are amazing people. And that's why the Gentiles are jealous. That's why all this Jew hatred and stuff. And you know, they were, you know, in World War II and stuff, they were thought they were going to take over the world. Well, they could if they wanted to because they're that smart. Now, who made them that way? God did. I mean, what they've done to the land of Israel is nothing but miraculous. And the technology that they've come up with, and the Bible says that the desert would bloom, and it did. And it was all because of the technology, because of the knowledge that they had, that God gave them. So how much greater is it going to be when they're fully reinstated? And you could even say that now, you know, that they've been reinstated. But I think, you know, gosh, can you imagine when Jesus comes back and rules and reigns from there? So Paul here is quoting, what he's quoting from is Psalm 69. And those verses refer to the faith invoked by the psalmist upon his persecutors. As you know, David talks a lot, and Asaph talks a lot about their persecutors. So here, Paul is using those same words, and he's applying them, stating that God has pronounced judgment against the unbelieving people of Israel. But his whole goal is to bring them back. So we can't lose track of what the goal is. And I thought when I read Matthew Henry's commentary on this that he had a great take on David's frequent words in Psalms, you know, about the enemies. And I think we really need to make a note in our Bible and that when we read Psalms that we'll remember to read it in this light. And this is what he said. He said, this teaches us how to understand other prayers of David against his enemies. They are prophecies of the judgments of God, not expressions of his own anger. So when you read in Psalms and he's over and over, he's talking about his enemies. He's expressing the heart of God, judgment against the enemies, but he's not expressing his own anger. Divine curses will work long, and we have our eyes darkened if we are bowed down in worldly I can't talk today. Mindedness. I'll read that again. Divine curses will work long, and we have our eyes darkened if we are bowed down in worldly mindedness. That speaks to us today. We have to guard ourselves against worldly mindedness. Like something that just pops into my head is abortion. You know, I've never had an abortion. You know, I know some people have. I've had some friends that had, but it never really affected me personally. You know what I'm saying? And so I just, you know, que sera, sera. You know what I'm saying? And I think that's just, we can be so inundated in our culture that, nah, it doesn't bother me, it doesn't really have anything to do with me. And so then what happens is we get worldly mindedness. And so we have to guard ourselves against that, and we have to see everything in the light of how God sees it. And even as Christians, we can start meandering over there into laziness and over into, thinking the wrong way and thinking something's okay and it's not. So we really got to guard ourselves against that. So, should we support Israel? Absolutely. They are God's chosen people, and they have not been replaced. And if you read on in Paul's writings in Romans 11, he goes on to tell us that Gentiles, as Gentiles, we're to pursue the Jew. Of course, I don't know we need to pursue, but we're to pursue the Jew, and we're to make them jealous of our relationship with Christ. In other words, we're to be a witness to them. And of course, we know that during the Great Tribulation, 2/3 of them are going to die. But those that remain will come to know and accept Him. And that's the whole goal of the tribulation. The whole goal of the tribulation is God's wrath poured out on Satan, on the world, on the unbelieving world. And that's why we know we're not going to be here, because we're not appointed unto His wrath. Tell you what, that's the best news we could ever hear. And in fact, Romans 11:26, Paul tells us plainly that all of Israel will be saved. So if you're on a different side, if you're on the side of, and I can say, well, we don't want, don't want all these people killed, and talking about the Palestinians and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, no, who's for war? Nobody's for war. But we have to choose sides, and we better be on the right side. And there's a lot of churches today that teach replacement theology, that the church has replaced Israel, and that is so false. If you are participating in that, you are really against God. You have chosen the wrong side. And I don't see, even if they don't support Israel from a biblical standpoint, how can they be against any group of people having this teeny tiny little piece of land the size of New Jersey? Even if you do think that they replaced Israel, why can't they have that one little piece of land to live on?
Yeah.
Why did nobody wanted the land.
Not till they moved back.
Not till they moved back, and not till they made it prosperous, not till the desert bloomed. Then everybody wanted it. So it was a land that literally nobody wanted, and it was legally given to them by the world, if you will. The UN approved it. The whole world approved it and said they could go there. And now they are so hated unjustly, and they're being brutally attacked, and the women and children and innocent men are slaughtered like animals.
I think that's a really good point for people to know that the whole world approved it. I think they think that the Jews took it over because it was their promise to them in the Bible. This was ours because God gave it to us, and nobody approved it.
No, they approved it. The United States approved it. The UN approved it. And I understand prior to it being suggested to them, I don't remember if it was the UN or who surigested it, but anyway, they were looking at somewhere in Africa.
Really?
Yes.
The Jews were?
Yes. Ben
Gurion?
Yeah, Gurion. And so I can't remember who actually said to him about Israel, but they were looking at Africa.
Yeah, because I know nobody wanted it because there was nothing there.
No, and if I'm not mistaken, it says it did not rain for 2,000 years. I mean, it was literally a wasteland.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is we got to read our Bible with understanding that God has never replaced Israel, and He never will. Because He makes it clear, this is my land, these are my people, and this is my plan. God never changes. So really, if you're siding with the Palestinians, you're at war with God.
Well, look at the Iranian leader that just died?
Yes.
I was listening to Jonathan Kahn about that, and he threaten them on a particular day so that he would exterminate them and then curse them. Said, I cursed the Jewish people to death and all this. It's like a week later, the dude dies in a helicopter.
In the helicopter.
Who caused the helicopter crash.
Yes.
And he died on a certain mountain.
Yes.
That had some type of biblical significance.
Yes.
I can't remember, and there was so many.
Wow.
You'll have to go back.
Listen, there's too much matching up with the Bible to think this is a coincidence.
And I don't think that when there are a group of Jews that stayed, that never left.
Yeah, there were.
Yeah,
There were
A
some.
small group. that
There were
never
some,
left.
and there were some Arabs that lived there too, but
Yeah.
there weren't very many. But see, there are Christians
Yeah.
who are for the Palestinians and against the Jews.
Well, yeah, because they use the term. As soon as I see that comment, oh, there's Zionists on.
Yeah.
Here we go. But
Yeah.
just pull out your swastika about.
Yeah, exactly. So, I don't know their hearts.
We had people who went here, remember?
Yes, I do.
In fact, how did Zionist term ever come about, and how did it get to be a bad word?
Yeah, I was just gonna ask about this.
That's really prevalent amongst the conspiracy crowd, which they're not wrong about everything, but they tend to blame the Jews for everything wrong in the world. And I think it's funny because I'm like, well, if you look at all the attendees in Bohemian Grove and the Trilateral, a very small percent are Jewish. Most of them are white Europeans.
Right, but see, I was saying, well, obviously this is all supernatural. I mean, and it doesn't make any sense.
Right.
Okay, so if it doesn't make any sense, then you know it's of Satan or it's a miracle, one or the
Right.
other. But they hate the Jews because they're jealous of them,
Yeah.
because they're so blessed. So I'm saying as Christians, or if you've got Christian friends that aren't, I'm not saying they're not Christians, but I'm saying will they stay Christians? Because they're fighting against God.
I've thought a lot about that. I don't think they will. I don't
Stay
think they will.
Christians.
No.
Yeah.
Because the Bible is very clear. God himself said, I will bless those who bless Israel, and I will curse those who curse Israel. And we had two people that came to this church. Remember, I called them out. I said, you know Jesus is Jewish, right? And then he just didn't really know what to say. And it's like, wait a second, how can you lambaste a certain sect of people with total vitriol towards them, but then sit here and say that you love Jesus, who is Jewish,
Yes.
Yeah.
who chose to come through the Jewish people?
Yes.
It doesn't make any sense. No, I was actually thinking that the other day. I don't think you will. I think this is the line in the sand that's drawn. And like Joshua told the children of Israel, he said, choose you this day whom you will serve. But as for me and my house will serve the Lord. This is it. And you're seeing a lot of people where their heart really is.
Exactly. So if we just look at Israel's short history, meaning back to 1948, and the attacks on them just since they've been a nation again, they've miraculously won
Oh, yeah.
against all odds. They were attacked the day after they became a nation. I don't even know how they could form a military that fast and win a war the day after they become a nation. I mean, to me, that's just miraculous. And so their existence is nothing short of a miracle. And I'm just warning everybody, you better open your eyes and you better see whose side God's on, or you'll find yourself on the wrong side. And Martin Lloyd-Jones said this, and he said, because I think this is really important in understanding the words of Paul, because listen, Paul's words to me, they get very confusing. Okay, and so I thought this was really good. He said, wrong seeking is extremely dangerous. We must seek God in the right way through Jesus alone. Judicial blindness refers to God withdrawing his grace and hardening the hearts of those who continually reject him. This is a form of punishment. So again, it's not that God's being mean. So judicial blindness refers to God withdrawing his grace and hardening the hearts of those who continually reject him. He's just giving them what they want. Because it's his grace that draws us. We couldn't even get saved if he didn't draw us.
That's right.
God does not create sin or directly harden hearts. He simply withdraws his grace, which naturally allows our sinful hearts to become hardened. He does this to demonstrate the evil of sin. Examples of judicial blindness include Pharaoh, Israel at the time of Jesus, and potentially the church today. Affluence and comfort have led much of the church astray. It's important where you go to church. It's important that you go to church. Because we are in the great falling away, because after COVID, I believe it was 48% have not gone back to church.
That's incredible.
So he'll give you what you want.
Yeah.
We should stop presenting the truth to those who continually blaspheme and reject it. We should continue praying for them, but stop actively engaging them. Revivals are completely in God's hands. We cannot manufacture revival through our own efforts and techniques. Revival comes when God softens hearts, not when we do certain things.
In fact, in the last days, the Bible says the exact opposite. It never says there's going to be a great...
No, revival. I poo-poo that. I hear that all the time on Christian television. There's going to be this great end-time revival. Where does that say
It
that?
says the exact opposite. In the last days, that there'll be a great falling away. The Bible does say that he'll pour out his spirit upon all flesh, but that's not talking about a revival.
No, that means he's going to call everybody to him. You will not go to hell. You will not die in the tribulation unless you...
Even in the tribulation, you got the two witnesses.
Exactly.
You've got 144,000 supernaturally
Pauls.
protected Jewish
believers. You got Pauls.
And then you got angels flying overhead that people are visibly going to see, telling everybody to repent and not to take the mark of the beast.
Yeah.
So you wind up in the lake of fire. You just flat out chose that.
Did y'all see? It's not the World Health Organization, but what's the other one? They just passed some law. They just passed, because remember the World Health Organization was trying to pass that law or whatever for the world, okay, in the next pandemic.
Yeah.
Wish I had
To grab control.
Yeah, to grab control, but to have some kind of world ID.
Oh yeah, I've been hearing about that.
Okay, well so it was some other big one World Health Organization, was another big world organization. Well, they passed it. Oh, okay, it's starting to come back to me. Okay, so one of the things is, like if we have another pandemic and you don't comply, you don't get the vaccine, I shouldn't have said that. If you don't get it, then they can seize your bank account. They passed that.
Wow.
That's just one of the things. And that you can't put anything on like social media. They'll get you for telling, untruths and,
Who's going to enforce it here?
Well, they said Sherry Tenpenny, Dr. Sherry Tenpenny, she was really outspoken during the whole, debacle, and she said we need to go to our local sheriffs right now.
Yeah.
Because and say, are you going to support this? Because it's going to be our local police departments that enforce this.
That are going to try to make you take the vaccine.
Yeah.
So they want a civil war then.
Well, yeah.
Because that's what will happen.
Exactly.
That's what happened.
And
But
some
what-
states will choose not to.
Right, exactly. But listen, this is just the mark of the beast. That's all that is. That is. We are going towards a one world currency. We are going towards the mark of the beast. What is that? If you don't have that, you cannot. They're going to seize your bank account. Guess what that is? I can't buy or sell.
Well, you know what? If it gets to that and they're seizing your bank account, the end is so near
Oh, my
that
gosh.
it won't matter if you have a bank account.
Yeah, exactly. That's
You
how.
don't pay your bills.
Yeah, because what Jesus said, don't be afraid, because when you see these things happening, you know that I'm coming.
But people that have their faith and trust in their money.
Oh my gosh, yes. So he says, the last point, he says, we should continue praying for revival and have comfort knowing that God is in control. Our duty is to continue to preach the gospel. So I thought those were all great points, and I hope that sheds new light on Israel and why God told us to pray for the peace of Jerusalem. And the UN just, a week ago or 2 weeks ago, just passed something saying that all of Jerusalem should be Jew-free. Listen, they're on the wrong side. They're on the wrong side. They are warring against God. And the other day when at the UN, Saturday when Netanyahu came, I watched it, and all these people walked out. Listen, their fate is sealed. They are on the wrong side. They don't want God, so they're going to spend eternity away from Him. And they are going to know why they're there. All these near-death experiences that I read about, the people went to hell, they all said they knew why they were there. Nobody said they didn't know. I don't deserve to be here, not a one of them. They all said they knew why they were there. So again, Jeff and I both believe that Psalms 83 is taking place before our eyes. So that means Ezekiel 38 is to follow. And I don't believe there's going to be a great big gap in between those two. And I think that's why Israel, Turkey and Iran and Russia just met. And interestingly, in Ezekiel 38, Lebanon, which they're fighting right now, they're fighting Hezbollah, the terrorist group in Lebanon, is not mentioned in Ezekiel 38, nor is Syria. And I think the reason that is because they've been wiped out. And we know, listen, if they destroy Damascus, then we know. I mean, that's it. We know that it's done, because that's, I can't remember exactly, Isaiah 17, I think. And so you'll know where all that's, because that's the stamp on it, you know, that Damascus is destroyed, that's done. And specifically, Egypt, Lebanon, Syria, and present-day Jordan, Iraq, and the Gaza Strip. None of those are mentioned in Ezekiel 38. So we know Gaza has been decimated as of September of this year, and Lebanon is soon to be. And so we read about these two wars. Why? So that we'll know what's going on and we can follow it correctly with the news. Okay? And if you're really interested in it, I've been following Amir Sephardi on Telegram. Now, your phone will ding all day long, all in the night and everything, because he just constantly is posting pictures, and I mean, he tells you minute by minute what's going on. But another one is a good source is Bill Salas. Of course, he's written that book on the war prophecies, the now prophecies. I think that's it. He wrote a great book on Psalms 83. He's a really good source. So anyway, don't be ignorant. We need to be aware of what's going on, because it's going to affect us. And we want to make sure that we're on the right side of history and that we're on the right side of eternity. All right, so now we're going to get back to David. So we're going to look at 1 Samuel chapter 27, and we're picking up at verse 8. And so 27, verse 8. It says, "And David and his men went up and invaded the Geshurites and the Gezrites and the Amalekites, for those nations were of old the inhabitants of the land, as thou goest to Shur, even unto the land of Egypt." All right, so the Gershites were a tribe east and northeast of the Sea of Galilee, and the people of Geshur are absent from the list of nations mentioned in God's promise to Abraham. I thought that was interesting, and that was where God told Abraham the land that he was going to give him, and that's in Genesis 15, 18 through 21. But they're mentioned in the list of people groups that the Israelites, after the conquest of Canaan, still needed to defeat. So that's in Joshua 13 too. So not sure really what that's about, but it's clear that God said to defeat them. All right, so the Gezerites were a widely scattered race of nomad Arabs. And the Gezerites, or Gizrites, it has been supposed, were the remains of a once powerful race who had been dispossessed by the Amorites. So you just got all this. It's just like it is today. It's just war, you know, these ancient Gentile Nephilim nations warring against another one, taking one over. It's just same old, same old. So the third name was the Amalekites. Now we recognize them because they were remnant of the once powerful tribe destroyed by Saul. And we studied that when we first started in that famous war when he disobeyed God, and he incurred the wrath of God and Samuel. And you know the story when King Saul took the king of the Amalekites, and he saved the king, and he saved all the animals, and when God told him to kill everybody, kill the animals, kill the people, kill everything, and he didn't do that. So these were enemy pagan nations. All right, so now David, is with the king, he's with King Ashish, okay, in Gath, remember? And so that's kind of where we're picking up. And so I'm not sure what the king of Gath thought about all this. And we're going to pick it up in verse 9 and see what's going on. And it says, "And David smote the land, and left neither man nor woman alive, and took away the sheep and the oxen and the asses and the camels and the apparel, and returned and came to Ashish." Verse 10. "And Ashish the king said, Whither have ye made a road today? And David said, Against the south of Judah, and against the south of the Jerahmeelites, and against the south of the Kenites." All right, so just the Jerahmeelites were descendants of Jerahmeel, and they dwelt in the south of Judah. All right, so do you catch what's going on here? See, if you go back to verse 8, David and his men went up and invaded the Geshurites and the Gezrites and the Amalekites. But when King Ashish said, "Where have you been?" Verse 9, he says, verse 10, he says, King Ashish said, "Where have you been, David?" And he said, "Against the south of Judah." So David's lying. All right. So, the Kenites, they were an ancient people living near the land of Canaan around the time of Abraham, and you can see them in Genesis 15:18. And the Bible mentions several dealings between the Israelites and the Kenites, who were always on friendly terms with each other. So we see David is lying to King Ashish, and I thought about this, and I thought, okay, he's in a real pickle. I mean, he's in a real jam, and I thought, okay, fear makes you do a lot of things, and that's why God said, don't fear, because you get in fear, and you're going to make some major mistakes, and many times fear will make you lie, right? Who lied to their parents out of fear because you didn't want to get a spanking? So David was he was literally attacking the enemy, not Israel. But he told Ashish that he was attacking Israel, and so these enemies that he's attacking, are these Canaanites, and it's exactly like what's going on today. These are ancient people that are descendants of these ancient people in the Bible. Is that nothing's different. And so verse 11 it says, "And David saved neither man nor woman alive to bring tidings to Gath, saying, Lest they should tell on us, saying, So did David, and so will be his manner all the while he dwelleth in the country of the Philistines." So what he's saying is, and what's interesting, the scripture is very interesting, because David lied, and he had to cover up his lie by killing all the women and children. He didn't really want to kill them, but he said, I had to kill them because if I don't, they'll tell on me. So he did this type of thing for 16 months while he lived there, going behind the back of the king and literally killing, his allies. And I don't know whether, what his intent was when he went there, but that's what's going down. So he's logically trying to figure out a plan, I think, out of fear. And it's going to backfire. And we're going to soon see, probably not this Sunday, but next Sunday, how it's going to backfire on him. And David's going to face a horrible situation, one of the worst in his life. That didn't involve him, but it involves the lives of well, it does involve him, and the lives of the 600 men that are with him. And it's a sad story. And it was not God's will at all, what is going to happen. But let's look at verse 12. And Ashish believed David, saying, He hath made his people Israel utterly to abhor, therefore he shall be my servant forever. So he's buying all these lies. He doesn't even know, because everybody's dead. He doesn't even know that David is stabbing him in the back. So he's buying the lies of David. And truly, he thinks that David is a Benedict Arnold. And he thinks that David has changed sides. He believes him. And he's thrilled because the champion of Israel, is fighting for him. And so it's all going to come crashing down, though, in the next chapter. Because why? Because sin always reaps a reward that we don't want to pay. See, David is in sin. David is not doing right. All right, so let's look at chapter 28, verse 1.
Before you get there, don't they usually bring like that, the armament of the leaders or the flag or whatever to prove that they were somewhere? So there's no such gift to Ashish or whatever his name is.
Doesn't mention one.
Yeah, makes you wonder why he didn't want proof.
Yeah, I don't know. I do know why. I think it's all a supernatural setup. God, even though David's in sin, God is still protecting him. God is still on his side.
Yeah, otherwise the king wouldn't believe him and ask for proof and
Exactly.
David.
Exactly. So
We're still in sin, God is still in sin.
Exactly. Because that's called grace and mercy.
Yeah.
All right, so chapter 28, verse 1. And it came to pass in those days that the Philistines gathered their armies together for warfare to fight with Israel. And Ashish said unto David, Know thou assuredly that thou shalt go out with me to battle, thou and thy men. All right, so again, Ashish is the king of Gath. And just like Diana pointed out last week, David had initially run to Gath previous to this and pretending to be insane. And so this kind of feeds into what you're saying, Chris, is in 1 Samuel 21 that this happened. And honestly, I had forgotten about that until she mentioned it last week. And of course, we know why he did it. We know why, he ran. He was trying to escape Saul. But it's just so interesting that the king didn't kill him, even if he was insane.
Yeah.
Kill him. Get rid of him. Okay? And so David was this guy's enemy, insane or not. And David had killed their hero, Goliath. And so David comes up with this plan, to pretend to be insane to avoid suspicion, and so they wouldn't kill him. And I think this is just a supernatural, again, David's trying to figure this out in himself. And God is walking behind him, God's literally walking behind him, covering his tracks. I mean, he's really just protecting him. And I wish the Bible would gave us more insight. But at some point, David had to fess up and say, I was lying. I mean, because we don't know how that went down. The Bible doesn't tell us, but okay, the king thinks he's insane. He takes him in, and I wouldn't take an insane person in. And so then all of a sudden, now you got David, fighting for him. So somewhere along the line, he had to confess.
And what really amazes me too is that David's 600 men and their families went with him on this crazy.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you can't help but see the hand of God, because here's a miracle, because it doesn't make sense. Okay, and then he develops a relationship with the king.
Yeah.
Okay, and then Ashish provides David a place to live along with his 600 men and their families. And last week we read in 1 Samuel 27 where David asked King Ashish for a city for them to dwell in. And because there were so many of them. And so King Ashish grants this David, at least on the surface, he appears to be a Benedict Arnold. So he gives him Ziklag. All right? And now you've read the Old Testament. If you've read the Old Testament, you're probably aware of what happened at Ziklag. And that's what I was referring to earlier. And we're not going to get to it this Sunday, but maybe next Sunday. We're going to pick it apart and learn all we can from that story of what happened in Ziklag. Because why? Because remember, all these stories are there for a reason. They're there for us to learn from. So we read in verse 1 that the Philistine army is gearing up to go to war with Israel, and King Ashish, he's included in this. And so he speaks with David, and he's just making sure that Benedict Arnold is on the right side. Okay? And so he's just making sure that David knows that he's expected to go to war with the Philistines, against his own people, the Israelites. And so I think Ashish is just simply stating the facts, and he's just testing David's response. And in fact, I think that Ashish was much more encouraged, thinking that with this mighty giant killer, with this mighty hero and 600 of his men, who he believes has betrayed their nation, Israel, that they were sure to win against the Israelites. I think God has intentionally disillusioned him. And I think that maybe, just maybe, they planned on making David a vassal king over Israel when they took out Saul. Because Saul's going to be their number one target. They're going to try to kill the king. You always try to kill the king. And so maybe, just maybe, that was their plan. Okay, we'll make David a vassal king over Israel because he's on our side. All right? And so that's just a supposition on my part. But then look at verse 2, and it says, "And David said to Ashish, Surely thou shalt know what thy servant can do. And Ashish said to David, Therefore will I make thee keeper of mine head forever." Now I want to read it in the Amplified because that's a little wordy. And it says, David said to Ashish, All right, you shall know what your servant can do. So Ashish said to David, Therefore I will make you my bodyguard for life. Okay. Do you understand the jam that David's in? He's been out fighting against this man and his people, behind his back, and now he is appointed the king's bodyguard. He is in big trouble. What are you going to do?
Yeah.
You're expected to, all you and your 600 men, you're expected to go to war for this guy and be his bodyguard, and yet your own people are going to be against you. I mean, he's in a real jam. What would you do? I mean, I don't even know. I don't even know what I would do. So, when I was thinking about this and thinking how we discussed last week, and we all do this. We all use our logic to try to figure things out and to try to reason in our minds how to get out of whatever situation we're in. And this is the thing as believers. Nobody taught me this. I learned this the hard way. God is waiting for us to call on Him and to invite Him into the situation. He won't push in.
And you see in a lot of the other chapters, David called on God.
Yes.
Not in this chapter.
No.
Yeah.
Yes, you see David calling on God and God answering him, but in this one he didn't call on God. And so I think the situation, I think depression came in. I think he got depressed, and then that brought in fear, and then that brought in logic, and then he starts trying to do all this stuff on his own. And so what can we learn from this? Just run to God. And I always say this, and I say this, it sounds like not respectful to God or whatever, but all the time I tell God, I can't, you got to do this, I can't. And I'll tell him, God, this is your problem. And I need you to fix it. And I tell you, when you do that and you quit worrying about it and you guard yourself from fear, I promise you he will work it out. He always does. And he works it out in ways that will just astound you. And it's guarding yourself from fear, and it's guarding yourself from letting yourself get depressed and letting your logic start taking over. This is literally a supernatural walk with a living God. And he will prove himself to you. So I just believe that David's trying to reason all this out. He's trying to come up with plans. He's trying to come up with a solution. And he's not consulting God. And he just gets himself in worse and worse trouble. Listen, we got to learn to run to God with our problems instead of running to the enemy. Like Joyce Meyer says, run to the throne instead of the phone. Run to God in prayer and lay your needs before him and ask him what to do. And then don't do anything until you hear. And listen, if you have no peace about something, and that's all you got to go on, God hadn't spoken to you, you don't know anything, all you know is you don't have any peace, then don't move forward. Stay still. Your peace or lack of it is a sign from God. And I've learned that if God's not speaking to me, but I have no peace about it, that means I'm supposed to stop and wait. Okay? And you don't want to get out of God's will because your logic told you to do something and you acted on fear. You are going to make the wrong decision. So David is in a real pickle. And I would just love to know what he was telling his men.
Yeah, how they went along with it.
Exactly.
You know, he might be going through all this himself and goes off and does his dumb thing. But he leads all these 600 men in
exactly. And as you probably know, which we're not going to get to today, but what happens in Ziklag ain't going to go pretty. And his men are going to blame him for what happens. And rightfully so. Because he's the one who's got him into all this. So I have no idea what he's telling them. I can't even imagine what he's telling them. Has anybody got any idea what he's telling them?
I just think they're following orders.
Maybe, but
Yeah.
I'm
Well,
sure.
look how
They're trusting him. That, oh yeah, he talks to God, so we can trust him. And he's done things how many times that seemed illogical, but God was leading him to do it. So now this seems illogical. Well, he must be following God.
Yeah,
But he wasn't.
Yeah.
And then you have to think about this facade that he's got to keep up.
Yeah.
I mean, you know how it is when you try to lie and then you can't remember what you told somebody, so then you got to cover, and then you always get caught, right? And so he's lying constantly, and he's got to keep up this facade. And so now it's getting so bad now he can't keep up with the lies. And so action is required, and so they're just really in this tough place. So does David fight against his own people? Or does he fess up and go back to Israel and join forces with them to fight the Philistines? But Saul would have killed him. Or he might have been rejected because Israel knows that he fled and he's been, over there. And they think maybe that he's been fighting with the enemy, so maybe they would have killed him. So he's just in a terrible position. And maybe Saul would have saw that he's going to fight with him, and maybe he'd have let him fight and then kill him. I don't know. But I want to ask you this. Would America have taken Benedict Arnold back after his betrayal to America and after he sided with and fought for the British?
No.
If he had had a change of heart, I made a mistake, I did wrong, I want to come back, would American government have let him come back? Of course not. They'd have killed him.
The trust was gone.
The trust was gone. So they would have hung him for treason or shot him. That's David. And they didn't have the internet and telephones, you know what I mean? So they probably think he's over there really fighting against them, perhaps, I don't know. And so that just further makes this a complete miracle that I was thinking through this, that the people of Israel would eventually take him back and make them king.
Yeah.
because I think, and I may be wrong, but I think they probably thought he was over there fighting against them for the enemy. And to have them bring him back and make him king, to me, is just a miracle. And so it just goes against logic. And again, when it's not logical, it's either Satan at work or it's a miracle of God. One or the other. So he's in a no-win situation. And tell me, can we not get ourselves in a pickle? Can we not get ourselves in a no-win situation just like David did? I want to jump ahead real quick to chapter 29, because this is going to give us some insight to see what not David's men were thinking, but what the King Ashish men were thinking about this situation. So let's jump forward to 29:3. And it says, "Then said the princes of the Philistines, what do these Hebrews hear?" And Ashish said unto the princes of the Philistines, "Is not this David, the servant of Saul, the king of Israel, which hath been with me these days or these years? And I have found no fault in him since he fell unto me unto this day." Now, to show that this is even more of a miracle, the Bible told us he was fighting against these other Gentile nations, these Amorites and stuff. He was fighting against them. Now, how did the princes of all these... See, this is like a coalition of those Canaanites, nations that King Ashish is talking to. And he's saying, for this time that he's been with me, I found no fault in him. How did the word not get to all these people? Yeah, I know the women. I guess there was nobody to carry it on.
He killed them all.
I guess they were sort of in isolation and the word never traveled. That's a miracle.
Yeah, or somebody happened upon this village and like, oh, they're all wiped out. Well, who wonder who did it?
Yeah,
well,
exactly.
I don't know.
I know.
It's gone.
I mean, I believe that God had to have just blinded somebody's eyes to know the truth. I mean, this is just miraculous.
Well, yeah, because you'd have trade, the vagabonds or whatever.
Some
I mean, somebody is going to see and know and hear.
The tax collectors.
Yeah. So see these princes of these other nations, they're like, we don't know about this. We don't know if we can trust David or not.
Yeah.
And so King Ashish is standing up for David. Well, he's been with me and I have found no fault in him until this day, so I believe him. So I think this is a great example of how God keeps Satan on a leash. Now, we know that, yes, Adam gave the dominion of the world over to Satan. God created the world. God gave the control of it over to Adam. Adam gave it over to Satan. But God is still sovereign. He's still the creator. He's still in control. And he's got Satan on a leash. And if not, we would not be here today. Because Stalin, Hitler, all these people, they would have killed everybody by now. I mean, the whole earth would be decimated. And if God did not keep these people on a leash. And so, in other words, God will only allow sin and Satan to go so far. And just like when it says in the Bible, if it were possible, even the very elect would be deceived. You know why it's not possible? Because he won't allow it. See, if you want to know him, if you want to go in the rapture, if you want to miss the tribulation, then he causes that to happen because he won't allow you to be deceived. Otherwise, you would be. So the reason it's not possible to be deceived is God won't allow it. And the only reason it's not possible is because God won't allow it. And I'm just praising him and thanking him that he won't allow it. And I just ask him to protect me and keep my eyes and ears open and don't let me be deceived.
That's why he gave us all of the things in Ephesians, the helmet of salvation.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So another thing that occurred to me in this scripture that God showed me recently was in Proverbs 23:7. when I was thinking to myself, how can these politicians say one thing one day, and then the next day they say the total opposite, and they still get away with it? And I was asking the Lord, and they're doing exactly what David is doing. They're lying to further their own agenda and power. Tell me that's not what David is doing. And here it is in Proverbs 23:7. It says, eat and drink, in quotes, eat and drink, saith he to thee, but his heart is not with thee. So that really struck me when I read that recently. What that means is that someone can say something with their mouth and not mean it.
Yes.
They don't mean it in their heart. So in other words, they're lying. And so listen to this one. This verse should really bring it home in Ecclesiastes 10:2. A wise man's heart in lies him to the right, but a fool's heart to the left. Is that why we call people that are conservative on the right and people who are liberal on the left? A wise man's heart lies him to the right, but a fool's heart to the left. That's where we get that. I'm telling you, so much stuff that goes on in our everyday world and phrases and things like that, things we say, things we do, our government, it's all in the Bible.
I'll be right back. I'm going to get Mary Ann. She's
Oh.
a flat tire.
Oh gosh. Is Ecclesiastes 10:2 not amazing? And so this is why we call politics in America on the right or the left, because that's it. It's right there in the Bible. That's why we call it that. So if you're wise, you're on the right. A fool is on the left. All right, so I got to stop. But, I'll stop right there. So next week we'll pick up in verse 3. So I hope y'all got something out of this. And if anything I can leave you with is be led by peace or lack of. And let's reject making decisions based on logic, because our walk with Christ is based on the Spirit. And we're led by the Spirit. And we don't want to get in these jams that David got in. And that's why these stories are here, are for us to learn from. So learn and don't make the same mistakes. So bless y'all and see you.